James Pond is the president of the Foundation to commemorate Chinese railroad workers in Canada.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Foundation to commemorate the Chinese railroad workers in Canada, I extend my heartfelt thanks and appreciation to all you in joining in celebration of the tie that binds film lunch. Ties that bind a national historical educational film project in partnership with Multiculturalism History Society of Ontario, with funding from Citizenship and Immigration Canada through the Community Historical Recognition Program. We count the story, the history of the Chinese Canadian from before Confederation to the building of the railroad and subsequent decades of regulated discrimination through the hit tax and the Chinese Exclusion Act and two World War to the present, and Prime Minister Harper's historical parliamentary apology in 2006 to Chinese Canadian for the head tax and subsequent exclusion of Chinese immigrants. In closing, I'd like to, on behalf of the Foundation, I extend special thanks for utmost dedication in the production of this historic project to Dora Nipp, Chief Executive Officer of the Multiculturalism History Society of Ontario, Chow, Executive Director and staff of Multicultural History Society of Ontario. Winston Liu, Project Manager, and his production team. Thank you for your attention and enjoy this joint lunch of the Multicultural History Society of Ontario Chinese Canadian Women 1923 to 1967 website and our Foundation National Historical Film. Thank you very much.
James and Vera Pond were the driving forces behind the Ties That Bind project. Now I'd like to invite Binh Chow, who's the director of the Foundation to commemorate Chinese railroad workers, and he'll say a few words.
Hi everybody. I'm so happy that I've been invited to come to this gathering. My name is Binh Chow. I am also the descendant of a railroad builder. Not just any other railroad, but it's CPR. As we look at it, CPR was very important to Canada, and it still is. Without this railroad, we might not know. We might not have Canada as we know it today, because after the War of 1812, the Americans, they failed to annexate the British colonies by force, and then they started to expand westward. In 1848, when gold was discovered in California, and it's so fast, within 2 years, California was the 31st state of the USA. Now, at that time, Canada tried to draw British Columbia into a confederation. And British Columbia agreed with condition. The condition was to build a railroad that links British Columbia to the east. And that is to build from Ontario to Vancouver, a railroad. And the stretch of railroad from Vancouver to the Rogers Pass is approximately 1,000 kilometers. That's the most difficult task as far as completing that railroad is concerned. The Chinese at the time, in the first 3 months of the project, initially the project was staffed by European immigrants. But within the 3 months after the starting of the project, no European wants to work in there because the work was so hazardous. The reason for that was the geographic landform is mostly sedimentary. It's very unsettled. And there's a lot of landslides. And when it happens, all the workers would just slide right off the cliff. And also there was a premature explosion due to the accumulation of gaseous hydrocarbons inside the tunnels. And in those days, the people didn't have the blasting cap that can be detonated by electricity. They got to use wind. And with the accumulation of gaseous hydrocarbon, it caused all kinds of premature explosions, which caused lots of fatalities. In the 1,000 kilometers of stretch of railway was being built, there was 4,000 Chinese workers' fatalities. Well, these were including malnutrition, accidental death, and also injuries result from the construction accidents. And following this railroad, the Chinese were subject to decades of legislative discrimination. It's systematic to eliminate the Chinese from coming into this country. And in 2006, during the celebration of the redress of Tax and Chinese Exclusion Act, Prime Minister Stephen Harper called this the most important national building enterprise in Canadian history. Despite all these nice words, it took the CCNC 22 years to struggle to get the partial redress. And there was over 80,000 people of Chinese origin paid the head tax. And the redress is only got a handful of survivors and their widows was managed to get the redress. The redress is not compensation. It's just a symbolic form of head tax return. And yet, the Conservative government capitalized this event during the most recent election propaganda, and they call this was the redress, make it as if the redress has been completed. But the redress is far from completed. As we speak, there's still over 3,000 families are waiting for their redress. They have applied, but the government failed to fulfill their 2006 election promise, in which the Harper government promised there's 2 stages redress. First was the survivor, and then is the families. But as we speak, the families redress still nowhere in sight. And I hope the Harper government will keep their promise, and eventually the family of the head taxpayer and also getting redress. Thank you very much.
to do now is we have some refreshments in the foyer, so we invite you to have some refreshments. And could you please come back at 7:45, and we'll have the premiere of the video documentary Ties That Bind.